My name is Phoebe Brown. I run Brown Tech. 50 employees, offices in Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. 7 years of work to get here, and I'm not done yet. I don't have much family left. Dad passed 4 years ago. Mum lives alone in Penrith. My cousin Ambrose and his wife Pansy moved to the North Shore about 2 years back. Glenn and Ursa are on Mum's side. We see each other maybe twice a year. That's enough for me. So when Mum called on a Tuesday afternoon and said Ambrose had organised a family dinner at a restaurant in the city, I almost said no. "It'll be good, Phoebe," she said. "We haven't all been together since Christmas." I said yes because of her, not them. The restaurant was in the CBD. Nice place, the kind where the menu has no prices and the waiters refill your water without being asked. I arrived on time. Everyone else was already seated. Ambrose stood up when I walked in. Big smile, firm handshake, like we were colleagues at a networking event. "Phoebes, there she is, the tech queen of Sydney." I smiled back, sat down. Dinner was fine on the surface. Good food, polite conversation. Ambrose talked about a property deal he was working on. Pansy talked about renovating their kitchen. Glenn and Ursa nodded along to everything Ambrose said, like they always do. Mum was quiet. That was the thing I kept coming back to. Mum is never quiet at dinners. She asks questions, she tells stories about the neighbours, she laughs easily. Tonight, she picked at her food and smiled at the wrong moments, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. When Ambrose went to the bathroom, I leaned over to her. "Are you okay?" "Fine, love," she said. "Just tired." She touched the bracelet on her wrist, a thin gold one Dad gave her on their 30th anniversary. I noticed it looked different, lighter. "Is that the same bracelet?" I asked. She pulled her sleeve down slightly. "Of course it is." She changed the subject before I could say anything else. On the way out, Ambrose clapped me on the shoulder. "Good to do this more often," he said. "Family should stick together, especially now that your mum is on her own." "She's not on her own," I said. "She has me." He smiled. "Of course she does." Something about the way he said it sat wrong with me the whole drive home. I called Mum when I got back to my apartment. She answered, but she sounded distracted. "Mum, that bracelet tonight, was it the same one Dad gave you?" A pause that lasted just a second too long. "Phoebe, I'm tired. Can we talk tomorrow?" "Sure," I said. "Good night." I put the phone down and opened my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I just knew something was off. I typed in Dad's name, Mitchell Brown, engineer. His old firm came up, a few old industry articles. Then I searched his patents. Dad had been quietly filing tech patents for years, small innovations, sensor technology mostly. He never made a big deal of it. I remember him mentioning royalties once, but I was in my 20s and distracted and I never followed up. I found 3 active patents still registered under his name. Then I clicked on the administrator details. I sat back in my chair. The administrator wasn't Mum, it was Ambrose. I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and dug through every public record I could find until 3 a.m. Dad filed his first patent in 2009, sensor calibration technology for industrial equipment. Nothing flashy, but useful, the kind of thing mining companies and construction firms license because it saves them money on maintenance. He filed 2 more in 2014 and 2017. All 3 were still active. All 3 were still generating licensing fees. I found the administrator change buried in the IP Australia records. 14 months after Dad died, Ambrose had filed a change of administration form. He listed himself as the authorised representative of the estate. The form required a signature from the estate executor. Mum was the executor. I stared at that for a long time. Either Mum signed it knowing what it meant, or she signed it not knowing. Either way, Ambrose had been sitting on Dad's royalties for nearly 3 years, and nobody had said a word to me. I closed the laptop and went to bed. I didn't sleep. By 7 in the morning, I was at the office. Taylor was already at her desk. She's always there before me. I've never once beaten her in. I sat down across from her and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. That's one of the things I value most about Taylor. She doesn't react. She just processes. When I finished, she turned to her screen. "Give me an hour," she said. I went through my morning meetings on autopilot. Quarterly review, product roadmap session. I nodded and spoke when I needed to, but my head was somewhere else entirely. At 9:30, Taylor appeared in my office doorway and closed the door behind her. She put a single printed page on my desk. "The 3 patents have generated just under $400,000 in licensing fees over the past 3 years, she said. The fees are paid quarterly to a business account registered to a company called MB Tech Assets Pty Ltd. MB, I said. Mitchell Brown. That's what it looks like, but Mitchell Brown is not the director. Ambrose is. The account has no connection to your mother. She has never received a single payment. $400,000. 4 years of Dad's work. His name on the company, his ideas generating money every single quarter, and Mum sitting in Penrith clipping coupons and selling her jewellery." "The bracelet," I said quietly. Taylor looked at me. "Mum was wearing a different bracelet last night. She tried to hide it. Dad's original one is gone. She's been selling things." Taylor sat down. "Phoebe, if your mother didn't know about the royalties, she may have been struggling financially for years." "I would never tell me," I said. "She's proud, and she probably thought the patents had expired or run out. Dad never made it seem like a big income stream." "It wasn't huge, but $400,000 over 3 years is not nothing, especially on a pension." I picked up the printed page and looked at it. Ambrose sat across from me at dinner last night. He made jokes, he ordered dessert, he told me family should stick together, and the whole time Dad's money was sitting in his account. I need to talk to Mum. Before I do anything else, I need to know what she signed and what she understood. "Be careful how you approach it," Taylor said. "If she feels accused, she'll shut down." "I know." I drove to Penrith at lunch. Mum was in the garden when I pulled up. She looked surprised to see me on a Wednesday. I didn't waste time. We sat at the kitchen table and I put the IP Australia record in front of her, the administrator change, Ambrose's name. She looked at it for a long moment. "He said it was to help manage things," she said finally. "After your dad passed, he said there was paperwork that needed someone to oversee it. I didn't understand what the patents meant. I didn't know they were worth anything." "Did he tell you they were generating money?" She shook her head slowly. "He told me they were basically dormant, that he'd keep an eye on them in case anything came up." I kept my voice steady. "Mum, those patents have made nearly $400,000 since Dad died." She looked up at me. The colour drained from her face. "He told me there was nothing," she whispered. I reached across and put my hand on hers. "I know." She looked down at her breast, the thin replacement bracelet. I didn't say anything about it. "What are we going to do?" she asked. I picked up the document and put it back in my bag. "I'm going to fix it, but Num, I need you to not contact Ambrose. Not yet. Can you do that?" She nodded. I hugged her at the door before I left. On the drive back to Sydney, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Silence for a moment, then Ambrose's voice. "I heard you went to see your mum today, Phoebes." I gripped the steering wheel. "Just a visit," I said. "Good. Keep it that way." He hung up.
Ambrose just made an error. He tipped his hand. He knew I'd visited Mum within hours of me leaving Penrith, which meant either Mum told him or he had a way of knowing what was happening at that house. I called Taylor from the car. "Taylor, Ambrose knew I visited Mum today. Find out if there's any surveillance equipment registered to her address or any unusual account activity on her phone plan." Taylor didn't ask questions. On it. By the time I got back to the office, she had something. Her internet account, Taylor said. It's not in your mother's name. It's billed to MB Tech Assets. Ambrose has been paying her internet and phone bills since your dad died, which means he has full account access. He can see call logs and connected devices. He'd been watching her for years. Not obviously, not in a way Mum would notice. He just made sure he was the one paying the bills. Helpful cousin looking after the grieving widow, and the whole time he had a window into her house. I sat down and thought carefully. Ambrose knew I was asking questions. That gave me a narrow window before he started moving things around. I needed to act fast, but I needed to act smart. I picked up the phone and called a lawyer named Christine Adler. She specialises in intellectual property and estate disputes. I'd referred clients to her before, but never needed her myself. I explained the situation in 10 minutes. The patents, the administrator change, the royalties, the document Mum signed while she was grieving. Christine was quiet for a moment. The administrator change can be challenged, she said, if your mother didn't fully understand what she was signing and there was no independent legal advice given at the time. We have a strong argument for undue influence, especially given the timing. 14 months after a death is still a vulnerable period. What about the money already taken? That's where it gets more serious for him. If he collected royalties as a self-appointed administrator without proper authority and without passing them to the estate beneficiary, that's not just a civil matter, that's edging into fraud territory. How long to build a case? If your mother cooperates and we can get the original documents, a few weeks. But, Phoebe, the moment he knows you're lawyering up, he'll move fast. These types always do. I thanked her and hung up. I needed one more thing before I was ready. I needed to know exactly how much Ambrose was worth right now, not his lifestyle, his actual financial position, because people who steal from grieving widows are rarely doing it from a position of strength. Taylor had the answer by end of day. Ambrose had 2 investment properties on the North Shore, both mortgaged heavily. His property company had a line of credit with a private lender that he was using to fund a lifestyle that didn't match his income. The royalty money had been keeping him afloat. Without it, he'd be in serious trouble within months. He wasn't rich, he was performing rich. Dad's money was the difference between Ambrose looking successful and Ambrose losing everything. I understood him now. The next morning, I went to Christine's office and we started building the case. Mum came in by train. She sat at the conference table looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, but she answered every question clearly. When Christine walked her through what Ambrose had done, Mum didn't cry, she just nodded slowly like pieces of a puzzle were finally fitting together. He used to ring every few weeks, always checking in, asking if I needed anything. I thought he was being kind. He was protecting his access, Christine said quietly. On the way out, Mum stopped at the door. Your dad worked so hard on those patents, Phoebe. He used to stay up late in the study. I'd bring him tea and he'd explain what he was working on, even though I didn't really understand it. I know, Mum, I nodded. Ambrose knew that too, she said. He was at our house enough times to know exactly what those patents meant. That landed differently than anything else I'd heard in the past 2 days. Ambrose didn't stumble across this opportunity after Dad died. He'd been watching and waiting long before that. I drove back to the office with that thought sitting heavy in my chest. Taylor was waiting at my door. You need to see this, she said. She handed me a printed email. It had been forwarded from a contact Taylor had at one of the licensing companies that paid royalties on Dad's patents. Ambrose had contacted them that morning. He was trying to sell the licensing rights.
He was trying to cash out. Ambrose knew I was circling, so he decided to sell Dad's patents before I could do anything about it. A lump sum payment would be harder to trace and harder to recover than quarterly royalties. He was smart, but he moved too fast, and fast moves leave mistakes. I called Christine immediately. He's trying to sell the licensing rights, I said. How do we stop it? We file for an injunction today, she said. If we can demonstrate to the court that the administrator appointment was invalid, we can freeze any transactions related to those patents while the case is reviewed. I'll have the paperwork ready within 2 hours. Do it. I hung up and turned to Taylor. I need you to contact every licensing company that has an active agreement on Dad's patents. There are 3 of them. Tell them there is a legal dispute over the administration of the estate and that any transfer of rights may be subject to court challenge. They won't want to be caught in the middle of a fraud case. They'll pause the deal themselves. Taylor was already typing. On it. I sat down and thought about Ambrose. He'd made his move in a panic. That told me he was more worried than he was letting on. The phone call 2 days ago was meant to intimidate me from backing off. When that didn't work, he went straight to the exit. That wasn't the behaviour of someone who thought he was untouchable. That was someone who knew exactly how exposed he was. By midday, Christine had filed the injunction application. By 2 in the afternoon, 2 of the 3 licensing companies had responded to Taylor's message, saying they were pausing all discussions pending clarification of the estate administration. The 3rd company called me directly. The licensing manager was a woman named Sandra. I'd actually met her once at an industry conference years ago. "Phoebe," she said, "I have to be honest with you. This man has been contacting us for the past week, pushing hard for a quick sale. He kept emphasising that the deal needed to be done by the end of the month. That kind of urgency always makes us nervous." "It should," I said. "He's not the authorised administrator. The original appointment is being challenged in court." "Understood. We're pausing everything until this is resolved." She paused. "For what it's worth, your father's sensor technology is still very much in demand. We've been happy to maintain the licensing agreement. It would be a shame to see it mishandled." I thanked her and hung up. That afternoon, Ambrose called me 3 times. I didn't answer. Then he called Mum. She did exactly what I'd asked. She didn't pick up. At 4 o'clock, he showed up at her house in Penrith. Mum called me the moment she saw his pa pull up. "Don't open the door," I said. "I'm sending someone." I called the private security firm Brown Tech used for executive protection and had someone at Mum's house within 20 minutes. Not aggressive, just present. A calm professional sitting in a car in the driveway, making it clear that Mum was not alone. Ambrose sat outside for 10 minutes, then drove away. That evening, Taylor came into my office with something new. "I've been going through the MB Tech assets records," she said. "Ambrose hasn't just been taking the royalties, he's been invoicing the company for management fees. He's been paying himself an additional $2,000 a month as the administrator for 3 years. Another $72,000 on top of the royalties. He built himself a salary out of Dad's estate," I said. "It gets worse," Taylor said. "Some of those management fee payments overlapped with periods where he was also claiming Centrelink benefits. He was telling the government he had no income while paying himself through the company." I looked at her. "That's welfare fraud." "Yes," Taylor said simply. I leaned back in my chair. Ambrose hadn't just stolen from Mum, he'd stolen from Dad's memory. He'd built an entire hidden income stream and then sat across from me at dinner, acting like he was doing the family a favour just for showing up. I picked up my phone and called Christine. "We need to expand the scope," I said. "It's not just the administrator dispute anymore. There are management fees, potential welfare fraud, and an attempted sale of assets under disputed authority. I want the full picture in front of the court." "This has moved well beyond a civil matter, Phoebe," Christine said. "At this level, we should be talking to the Australian Federal Police." I'd been thinking the same thing. Set up the meeting. I put the phone down and looked out at the Sydney skyline. Ambrose thought he was dealing with a cousin who was too busy running a company to pay attention. He had no idea that running a company is exactly what taught me how to dismantle one. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You think you're protecting her, you're just making things worse. Walk away, Phoebe. Last warning." I screenshotted it and forwarded it straight to Christine. Then I typed back 2 words. "See you in court." The next morning, I walked into the office and Taylor handed me a coffee without saying a word. That meant bad news was coming. "Sit down," she said. I sat. She put her laptop on my desk. There was an article on a Sydney tech industry blog, posted at 6 that morning. The headline read, "Brown Tech CEO in family dispute over father's estate. Sources question company integrity." I read it quickly. It was thin, vague, no real facts, but it used phrases like internal conflict and questions about governance and sources close to the family enough times to do damage. Ambrose couldn't beat me legally, so he went for my reputation instead. I put the laptop down. "How many people have seen it?" I asked. "It's been shared in 2 industry forums," Taylor said. "Nothing mainstream yet, but if it gets picked up, it could affect the Westbridge contract." The Westbridge contract was the biggest deal Brown Tech had in progress, a 12-month software partnership with a national infrastructure company. We were 2 weeks from signing. Any suggestion of instability at the executive level, and they'd walk. I picked up my phone and called our head of communications. "I need a statement ready within the hour," I said. "Nothing defensive, just clear and factual. Brown Tech is performing well, leadership is stable, any family matters are private and have no bearing on company operations." "Done," she said. I hung up and looked at Taylor. "Who runs that blog?" Taylor slid a piece of paper across the desk. A name, Marcus Tell, a freelance writer who covered tech industry gossip mostly, small following, occasional hits. "So has he written about Brown Tech before?" "Never," Taylor said. "First mention." "So someone fed him this story specifically." "Ambrose has a golf contact who knows Marcus, apparently, 2 degrees of separation." I nodded slowly. Ambrose was rattled. The injunction had frozen the patent sale, the licensing companies had gone quiet on him, his income stream was drying up, and his exit was blocked. So he pivoted to pressure. He wanted me distracted. He wanted me managing a PR problem instead of a legal one. I wasn't going to give him that. I called Christine. "The blog article is harassment. Can we add it to the AFP file?" "If we can demonstrate it was coordinated to interfere with legal proceedings, yes. Keep everything. Screenshots, timestamps, the unknown number messages too." "Already done." At 11, my phone rang. It was Glenn. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Phoebe," he said. He sounded uncomfortable. "I just want you to know I had nothing to do with that article." "Okay, Glenn." "I mean it. Ambrose called me last night asking me to back up some story about you mismanaging your dad's estate. I told him no." I sat up slightly. "He asked you to go on record?" "He wanted me to say I had concerns about how you were handling the family finances. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about and I wasn't getting involved." "Did he say anything else?" Glenn paused. "He said he had documents that would change everything, that you'd been making financial decisions for your mum's behalf for years without proper authority. He said he was going to file a counter-complaint." I almost laughed. Ambrose had nothing. He was building a fiction to muddy the water. It was the oldest move in the book. When you can't defend the facts, you bury them in noise. "Thanks for telling me, Glenn," I said. "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner," he said. "At that dinner, I could see something was off. I should have said something." I didn't respond to that. I wasn't ready to forgive the silence yet, but I noted it. After I hung up, I sat quietly for a moment. Then I called Mum. She answered straight away. "Ambrose rang me this morning," she said, before I could speak. "He was crying. He said you were destroying the family. He said if I just spoke to you and asked you to drop everything, he would pay back some of what he took." "Some?" I said. "That's what he said. He doesn't get to negotiate, Mum. This is past that now." She was quiet for a moment. "He said you'd say that. He said you care more about winning than about family." That one landed. I won't pretend it didn't. I took a breath.
Mum, Dad worked years on those patents. He built them for you, for us. Ambrose took that quietly and deliberately and then watched you sell your jewellery. That's not a family misunderstanding. That's a decision he made over and over again for 3 years. Silence. I know, she said finally. I know you're right. Are you okay? I'm managing, she said. The security person you sent is still here. I feel better with someone outside. Good. Keep your doors locked. Don't let Ambrose in. After I hung up, Taylor appeared at the door again. The AFP meeting is confirmed. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I nodded. Also, Taylor, Christine just called. The court granted the injunction. The patents are frozen. Ambrose cannot sell or transfer anything. That was the moment I knew he had nowhere left to run. But Taylor's expression hadn't changed. She was still standing at the door. There's something else. Tell me. Ambrose filed a complaint with ASIC this afternoon. He's claiming Brown Tech has been using proprietary technology that originates from your father's patents without a proper licensing agreement. I stared at her. He was coming after my company.
I sat with that for 10 seconds. Then I started thinking clearly. Ambrose had filed a complaint with ASIC claiming Brown Tech was using Dad's patent technology without a proper license. It was a bold move, desperate and bold. But here was the problem with his claim. Brown Tech was built on cloud infrastructure and software architecture. Nothing we did touched sensor calibration technology. Dad's patents and my company existed in completely different corners of the tech industry. He'd filed a complaint that had no foundation. He just needed it to exist. A pending ASIC investigation would spook the Westbridge people. It would create enough uncertainty to stall the contract, and stalling the contract meant pressure on me. Pressure on me meant maybe I'd back off. That was his thinking. It wasn't good thinking. I called Christine. He filed with ASIC, I said. I just heard, she said. Phoebe, this is actually good for us. Filing a false or vexatious complaint with ASIC is a serious matter. Combined with the AFP file we're building, this shows a pattern of deliberate interference. It strengthens everything. How quickly can we get a response in front of ASIC? I'll have a technical rebuttal filed by end of day. We include Brown Tech's full IP documentation. There is zero overlap with your father's patents. This complaint won't survive a preliminary review. Good. I hung up and called the Westbridge contract manager directly. His name was David. I dealt with him for 8 months. We had a good working relationship. I told him clearly and calmly that a family member was making false complaints in an attempt to interfere with a personal legal matter. I told him Brown Tech's legal and technical documentation was available for immediate review. I told him the ASIC complaint would be dismissed and I could have Christine send him a briefing note within the hour. David was quiet for a moment. Phoebe, he said, we've spent 8 months getting to this point. I've seen how your team works. I'm not walking away from a solid partnership because of a family dispute. Send me the briefing note and we'll proceed as planned. I thanked him and put the phone down. Taylor was watching from the doorway. Westbridge is fine, I said. She nodded once, then allowed herself a small smile. The AFP meeting the next morning lasted 2 hours. Christine presented everything: the administrator change, the royalty payments, the management fees, the welfare fraud, the harassment messages, the blog article, the vexatious ASIC complaint. The investigator across the table was a quiet woman named Senior Constable Webb. She took notes and asked precise questions and didn't react to anything emotionally. I respected that. At the end, she looked at the file in front of her. She said, "This is a comprehensive brief," she said. "The financial abuse elements are clear. The welfare fraud will go to a separate agency, but will coordinate. The vexatious ASIC complaint and harassment are noted." She closed the folder. "I want to be straightforward with you, Ms. Brown. This will take time, but the evidence is strong." I nodded. "I understand," she said.
"Does your mother understand what's involved in proceeding?" "She does," I said. "She wants to proceed." Senior Constable Webb stood and shook my hand. "We'll be in touch." Outside on the footpath, Christine turned to me. "That went well," she said. "What happens to him now?" I asked. "Realistically, the AFP will investigate. Given the welfare fraud element, the Department of Human Services will be involved as well. Under the Crimes Act, misappropriation of estate assets at this level carries potential imprisonment. The civil case for recovery of the royalties and management fees runs separately. We'll pursue that through the Supreme Court. Your mother should recover the majority of what was taken. And the patents? Return to the estate immediately once the court confirms the administrator appointment was invalid, which it will." I thanked her and walked to my car. I sat there for a moment before starting the engine. 4 years. Dad had been gone 4 years, and in that time, Ambrose had quietly taken nearly $500,000 from his estate, from Mum. He'd done it carefully and patiently, and he'd hidden it behind a performance of being helpful family. I thought about Dad in his study late at night working on those patents. He used to say that the value of anything isn't what it's worth today, it's what it protects in the future. He built those patents to protect Mum, he just didn't count on the threat coming from within the family. 3 weeks later, the court ruled the administrator appointment invalid. MB Tech Assets Pty Ltd was wound up, the remaining funds were returned to Mum's estate. The licensing companies resumed their quarterly payments directly to Mum. Christine filed the Supreme Court claim for recovery of the misappropriated royalties and management fees. The AFP investigation was ongoing. Ambrose had engaged a lawyer. He was not having a good time. The asset complaint was dismissed in 11 days. The Westbridge contract was signed on a Tuesday morning. Taylor opened a bottle of sparkling water in the conference room, and we all pretended it was champagne. 6 weeks after the dinner at Harlow's, I drove to Penrith on a Sunday afternoon. Mum was in the garden. She looked better than she had for a long time, more settled, like something that had been sitting heavy on her had finally lifted. We had lunch at the kitchen table, nothing fancy, sandwiches and tea. She was wearing a new bracelet, simple, silver. She'd bought it herself. I spoke to a financial counsellor this week, the one Christine recommended. She's helping me understand what comes in and what goes out. I should have done that years ago. "You didn't know you needed to," I said. "You let people manage things for you because it was easier. Your dad managed everything, and when he was gone, I just let the next person step in. I didn't ask enough questions." Ambrose was deliberately unclear. That's on him, not you. She nodded slowly. "I know, but I'm going to ask questions from now on." We sat quietly for a while. "He rang me last week," she said. I didn't answer. "Good. It gets easier," she said, not answering. I looked at her across the table. She seemed steadier than I'd seen her in years, not because the problem was solved, but because she finally knew the truth of it. On the drive back to Sydney, I thought about what the past 6 weeks had cost me: sleep, energy, focus, some peace of mind. But I thought about what Dad would say. He'd say a foundation is only worth building if you're willing to defend it. I was Phoebe Brown, CEO, daughter, and I'd just done both.